Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Diane Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is February 28th, 2024. If you have read the description of today's podcast or checked out the current issue of Book Banter magazine, you know that today's episode comes with a few trigger warnings. We are talking about a very sensitive subject today regarding when people take their own life or take the life of another person. Because of some of the censors in some of the podcast streaming services, I did have to bleep 3 words in today's episode. I'm sure you're going to be able to figure out what the words are. The first one starts with an S, and it's the word that is used when somebody takes their own life. We also have an M word when somebody takes the life of another, and a K word when somebody takes a life. So I do apologize for all of the bleeps in this show. But the thing is, I wanted to make sure that it goes through everywhere because this is such an important discussion. And the work that this woman is doing is so vital that I want to make sure that it doesn't get dropped anywhere. I want it to go everywhere without any problems. So I erred on the side of caution. So please bear with this. But if you are somebody who is the survivor of this kind of loss in your family, LaToya's book is so easy to read. It is so helpful. She is so understanding, and she does this work regularly on her podcast as well. And she is an advocate with so many different programs. She really is a great person to go to with this kind of a discussion. I'm not going to go into much more of this. There's a lot that we cover in the show. So please listen if you can, because it is very important. We need to have more discussions with people talking openly and honestly about mental health issues. And that's why we're bringing this now as part of our Love Fest, because so many people who do suffer from these kinds of mental conditions are lacking love in their life, love for themselves, love that they feel from other people. And I think it honestly falls very well into a category when we want to talk about the importance of love. This is such an important topic. So please, if you can, listen to the entire show and tell others about it. We need to start having more of these discussions so that we stop losing so many of our loved ones. So please, welcome to Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, LaToya Bond. The way that I like to start these interviews is I just have my guest tell my audience who you are and what you do.
My name is LaToya Bond, and I am an acclaimed author of 2 books. I work as a legal professional during my 9-to-5 workday, and I also have a small home-based business where I make one-of-a-kind door hangers, and I'm also a home baker. I have a cottage home bakery. But one of the most important parts of my life is I have become an advocate for suicide prevention and awareness. In March of 2020, my dad took his own life in a murder-suicide. So since the tragedy, I have become an advocate. And one of my life's greatest missions is to help put an end to suicide so that we can live in a world where suicide no longer exists.
That would actually be an incredible thing to have happen because I personally know so many people that have been touched by this in their lives. And just reading through your book, your writing is just so easy and vivid, and the emotion just really comes through. And the story that you have to tell is incredible. Your father is one of those people that somebody would look at him and think, oh my God, he's got a good career. He's got a nice family. He's got to be just happy all the time. I don't think from the picture that you paint of him that people would look at him and go, you know, he might be depressed and be thinking dark thoughts.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct.
And I think that's one thing that people need to realize. There are so many myths that you actually talk about in your book about what surrounds a person who might take their own life by suicide.
Yes. Yes, my dad was an amazing guy. He was tremendously intelligent. He was one of the first to go to college in his family. He had a decorated career as a radio TV broadcast engineer for one of the major television networks here in our city. He worked there for 30 years. He was a star in the public eye, but behind closed doors, he struggled with internal battles, depression. When this happened, no one saw this coming. We were all totally shocked. You know, hindsight is 2020 when it comes to suicide. But looking at my dad, he was always happy, but he would always make jokes about suicide. For
Mhm.
example, I would call him after a long day and I would go, "Hey, Dad, how was your day today?" And he would go, "Oh, I had a rough day. I'm just looking for the bridge." And I would say, "Looking for the bridge? What do you mean?" And he would say, "Oh, because I'm ready to jump." And we would laugh it off. But now I realized that there was an element of truth to the sarcasm. He really wanted to jump. So my mission now is to help people understand the subtle warning signs of someone who may be depressed or contemplating suicide.
And more than that, I think this also is like a fantastic book for people who are survivors of a suicide loss.
Yes, that's why I wrote the book, to help other suicide loss survivors, because when you lose someone to suicide who's so close to you, like a parent, as I did, you're plagued, number one, with a lot of guilt and a lot of regret because you didn't see the warning signs. You weren't able to help them. You weren't there in their time of need. But what this book will do is it will help you come to know and understand that, number one, those feelings are normal. It's normal to feel regretful. It's normal to feel like, this is my fault. Why couldn't I save him? But also, if you continue to read through the book, you'll come to understand that there's the other side of the guilt. There's the other side of the regret. There is something that you can do to channel those emotions into a positive factor. And that's what I help people do in this book, because that's what I have done. That's why I'm here and I'm able to talk to you, Diane, because I found a way to navigate the pain in a positive way.
Well, and you even had some extra struggles whenever you were dealing with your dad's loss because this happened right before COVID hit.
It happened right before COVID. And when you lose someone to suicide, it's very devastating, it's traumatic. However, when it's a murder suicide, it adds a whole another level of grief, embarrassment. Because here's the thing, my dad was married. The couple had only been married for 9 months. They reunited at a high school reunion event, and they had only been married for 9 months. And this happened. He was 67 at the time, she was 68. And so to get a call that your dad has committed the most horrible act known to man, to take a person's life, that part of it is difficult in itself. But then to come to know that he also took his own life in the process, man, I some days I wake up in the middle of the night and I still can't believe that this happened. It's just terrible.
And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering why I decided to put you and your book in for our February Love Fest.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Because
there's
with
a
this, it's like such a heavy subject to have to talk about. But I think this is so important because there are so many people who lose loved ones to this.
well, here's the thing. Love is the thing that makes all things beautiful. And we're talking for the month of February because February is about love and Valentine's Day. My book is called Speaking of Love because my dad was once a radio host and he hosted a sports radio show. And the sports radio show was called Speaking of Sports. So when he died, I wanted to do something to honor his memory. But I don't know anything about sports, but I know all about love. So his show, Speaking of Sports, was the development of my book and the podcast that I have in his honor, Speaking of Love. Because when people take their own lives, there's a lack of love somewhere, whether it's a lack of receiving love or a lack of self-love. And I think for my dad, there was a lot of love around him, but because of the internal battles that he had within, he wasn't able to be receptive of the love because he didn't have self-love.
I can actually understand that very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did you survive the aftermath of this when you had to go into isolation with COVID and deal with this so much alone?
Oh, it was so hard. And then one thing I don't mention in the book is that I was going through a divorce at
Oh,
that very moment. Yeah, I was married to someone who didn't value me as a person. And I had to come to realize that I was losing that marriage as well. So, what I did to help channel my pain is I have a small home based business where I make wooden objects and I have a jigsaw. And so I would go to the hardware store and I would buy a big slab of plywood, get my jigsaw, and I would carve out these huge door hanger images like a heart, face, just things like that. And so I really focused a lot on my craft. I would work on my door hangers and I would create these beautiful wooden art pieces. And then, in addition to that, I love to cook. I am a great baker. So, spending time in the kitchen, working on my artwork. And the most important thing I did to help channel this is I created a podcast in honor of my dad. And the podcast is called Speaking of Love, after his radio show, Speaking of Sports. So, all of those things helped me navigate my way through the pain. I still heard about it, but those tools, tapping into my creativity, was one of the best ways to help me get through this pain. And my father, the podcast that I have created for him, every Saturday morning when I get ready for my podcast, it's like I'm getting ready for a therapy session because I'm interviewing people from all around the world, different walks of life on the subject of love.
that's amazing. And that's the great memorial for your father to have a show about love and spreading that and talking to so many other people who could possibly prevent others from having to go through this in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's my mission.
I was checking out some of your door hangers and they are absolutely adorable. I love the work that you're doing with those.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really love making door hangers. When I would sit at the table to make a door hanger and carve out this piece of wood and turn it into a beautiful piece of artwork, it was like taking a pill, Diane, the pill to help me, to help my pain. Like when you go to the pharmacy and you get your medication and you read the directions and it'll say take one every 8 hours. That door hanger was that pill that I needed to help get through another 8 hours of the day. It was my therapy.
Whenever you find something creative to pour yourself into, it is therapeutic. There is something about being expressive in different formats that can
Mm-hmm.
really bring up emotions and thoughts that you don't know how to deal with otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And you know, those pieces that I made during that time of bereavement and grief, they're so sacred to me, Diane. I don't think I'll ever be able to sell those. I think that I'll keep them for the rest of my life. They mean so much to me.
That is
Yeah.
easy to understand. For me, I come from a family of artists, and usually, whenever people are going through tough times, that's what they do. They dive into their art and they start creating because that's a way to deal with any kind of emotion. You can do it because you're trying to release anger or frustration or happiness. I mean, you can push anything into your art.
Yes, you can.
Now, you also mentioned your cooking. I have to tell you, I was scrolling through your cookbook on my computer, and my husband walked up and he's like, "Oh, you can make that for me, and that, and that, and that." I think we probably have menus for like the next 2 weeks figured out because of things that he wants me to try from your cookbook.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yes, I enjoy cooking. I have always been a cook, a baker. When I was in middle school, my teacher demonstrated a lesson on how to bake homemade peanut butter cookies from scratch. And I brought the recipe home and I mastered it on my own, and it became a household favorite. My stepfather loved them, my brother loved them, my mom loved them. And I've always been the type of child who would sit in the kitchen with my mom, with my grandmother, and I would watch them. And I learned so many great things. And the older I get, the more I realize that cooking is definitely a part of my heart. When I prepare a meal and I serve it to someone, it's like the greatest form of love, in my opinion. I love feeding and serving and the looks on their faces when they look at this huge plate of food. So I do believe that food is love, and I really enjoy cooking. Because you know how you have a group of people, you're all sitting at the dinner table and oh, can you please pass the butter? Can you please pass the salt? Well, no, I want you to please pass the love.
That just is such a great thing to be sharing with other people, to give that idea that there's so many different ways that you can express yourself and to share love with other people. If you're not comfortable saying, hey, I love you, there are other ways you can do it.
Definitely.
When I was growing up, my grandmother had this spice cake that she would make. It takes 2 days to make the thing. And that was one of the things people always asked from her. They only wanted this cake if she made it. And so that was like a big thing. If Granny really loved you and wanted to show that love for you, she made you this cake.
Yes, I just love it. And I think what birthed the idea that food is love is that when I would cook and share with people, I would often hear people say, you're going to make me fall in love, or you can make people fall in love with your cooking. So I get a lot of rave reviews, and I sell my desserts in downtown Detroit at this little store. And I mean, people are coming from other buildings just to get peach cobbler or a slice of my pound cake. It's really rewarding, and I love it.
And I love what you put into just wrapping them up too. You go all out with your whole production of these things.
Yes, I do, Diane. It's definitely a labor of love. I love what I do. I put a lot of energy and time into my work. I make all of my bowls. These are homemade bowls that you see wrapped on the container. So when you order a cake from me, when you receive the finished product, you're getting the biggest expression of love that I can present to you as my customer.
I think they're fabulous. And the recipes, I love the way that you write them out because it's so simple and easy to follow.
Yes, thank you for that.
The recipe that you're going to let me share in our February issue of Book Banter magazine is just absolutely beautiful. My husband's already said he wants it for Valentine's Day. But it's simple and it sounds so good. And with all the fresh strawberries on it, it looks just gorgeous.
Yep. Just take your time. Don't take any phone calls. It's very serious work. I make sure that I'm completely focused, because if I'm not focused, I might not produce my best work. So I put my phone on do not disturb when I'm in the kitchen. I don't want any distractions. It's serious business.
Well, and a lot of people don't seem to realize too, it's really easy if you get certain ingredients off, because baking is chemistry. And if you don't have the right combination, you're not going to get the right lift. You're not going to have the right density. You might not have the right flavor, but usually it's the chemistry involved in getting the texture just right.
Exactly. And not over mixing. What I do is I mix my wet ingredients first, and then I slowly incorporate the dry ingredients. And once you're done incorporating the dry ingredients, stop mixing. Because if you overmix, you're going to have a tough cake. Your texture is not going to be good. So there's a science to how often you stir. A lot of people love the big mixers that kind of go on their own.
Yeah.
Well, I use an old-fashioned mixer. And when I get to a certain point in mixing, after all the dry ingredients have been added, I turn that handheld mixer off and I stir with my hand the rest of the way manually.
That is such an important point, that if you overmix, you can have a brick.
Yes.
Now is the point of the show that we like to do 5 quick questions that rarely turn out to be quick, but I refuse to give up. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So question 1, what is your favorite memory of your father from childhood?
Oh, my favorite memory of my dad. Okay, I have a good one. Okay, so I have a little sister. And so one day my dad, my sister, and I, we're in the car, we're driving down the street, and there's this bar and it's called Dizzy Ducks. And so my sister says, Dad, why do they call that place Dizzy Ducks? She said, that's a weird name for a place to eat dinner. And he said, well, they call it Dizzy Ducks because when you leave there, you're as dizzy as a duck. You get it? Because you've been drinking. So that was his. I mean, there's so many stories I could tell you like that, but he was just a funny guy. He had a quick wit and he was amazing with words.
That's cute. I like that. Question 2. Which comes easier for you? Your writing, your broadcasting, your cooking, or your crafts?
Oh, I would say the cooking and the broadcasting.
And which one's most difficult?
The writing, because I'm so emotional. I tend to put a lot of emotion into my writing. So I have to go back and take out a lot of the emotion and kind of stick to the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the writing is the most difficult.
I think you did a great balance in your book, Speaking of Love. It reads so well.
Wow, thank you. And you know, Diane, after 3 hours after I published the book, Speaking of Love, it became an Amazon #1 bestseller.
Wow.
Internationally in the United States and Canada within 3 hours of being published. Yes.
That's amazing.
It's really been a blessing.
It's not amazing that it became a bestseller. It's amazing that it became one that fast. That's incredible.
Yes.
Wow. Question 3. I already know the answer to this because I've been reading your press information, but do you have any fur babies?
I do. I have a tuxedo cat. She's a domestic short hair cat, and I've had her since 2010. So that's 14 years. And she is the love of my life. Her name is Faith. And we rescued her from the Michigan Humane Society. And she is the love of our lives. We just love her so much. She's the sweetest thing ever. In 14 years, she's never given me 1 ounce of trouble. She's right here, right now, laying on my feet.
Oh,
she's so sweet.
Question 4. Since you are such an accomplished cook and baker, what is your favorite go-to comfort food?
Ooh, my homemade German chocolate cake.
Oh, wow.
Hands down. The icing is made from scratch. The cake, everything I make is from scratch. But I really love my German chocolate cake.
Question 5. What do you love to do to celebrate Valentine's Day?
Oh, I love to go to dinner. I love going to a nice restaurant, having a nice steak dinner. And whoever the love of my life is at that time, I will bake them a special Valentine's Day cake of their choice. That's how I like to celebrate Valentine's Day, with a good dinner and beautiful dessert.
That sounds fabulous. I also know that you do a lot of advocacy. What are you doing now to try to help promote awareness about people who are contemplating suicide, family members who are dealing with it? What is your mission at the moment?
Well, here's the thing, Diane. In the United States alone, suicide is the second leading cause of death. Last year, 48,000 people died by suicide. Let me say that again. Last year in the United States, 48,000 people died by suicide. Every 11 minutes, someone dies by suicide in the United States. So that means, Diane, by the time we get done recording this podcast, at least 4 people will have died by suicide. You are far more likely to encounter a person having suicidal thoughts than you are to encounter a person having a heart attack, which is one of the #1 causes of death. If you stand in a room, Diane, with 20 people, at least 2 of those people are contemplating suicide at that very moment. So because of all of those statistics I just gave you, I have become an advocate for suicide prevention and awareness. I sit on the board of directors for an organization dedicated to educating people about suicide, and we also support suicide loss survivors like myself. And what I want to say to your audience, Diane, life is hard. We weren't born with a bed of roses up under us. Sometimes in life, we're going to face challenges. But what we need to know is that we were born for a divine purpose and that our existence on the planet Earth has value. You are loved. And if there's anyone here right now listening who's ready to give up on life, who's ready to just let it all go, you don't want to be here anymore, you're contemplating suicide, I want you to know that you're not alone. I've been in that space. I wanted to have a reunion with my dad and meet him wherever he is because life is just that hard. But I'm here to tell you that if you stay awake for the rebirth, every morning when we wake up, we're rebirthing a new day. If you just stay awake for the rebirth, your problem may not end that next day, but if you get help, you can reach the other side of it. So if you're feeling suicidal, you can reach out to me. You can dial the 1-800 number, 1-800-247-HELP, or you can dial 988 in the United States and get the help that you need. You are loved. Hang on.
And I think there's one big myth that we need to discuss, that a lot of people think that if somebody always seems happy, they're always making jokes, they seem like they're accomplished and have it all, that they're never going to have those kinds of thoughts. And that's absolutely not true.
You know what? That is a big myth. And like I mentioned earlier in this interview, Diane, my dad was a happy-go-lucky person. When he walked in the room, he made everybody feel like somebody special. He would always make jokes. Everything about him was funny. He was intelligent. So because of what has happened to him, I'm suspicious of people who are always making jokes, the life of the party, comedians. Look at Robin Williams. People who have that kind of personality where they're very funny, those are the ones that are harboring the most pain on the inside. But they use a lot of humor to mask that pain.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been preparing to actually share this because I'm writing my own memoir. So a lot of this is going to be coming out. And since we are talking about this topic today with you, I'm going to share it here. That whenever I was in college, I was having a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. And I was actually doing very well. I had designs that were on international and national television. I had gone from being a designer at a newspaper at my local university to being the advertising manager. I was only supposed to hold that job for a year because it was a student position, but I did such a good job, they let me keep it for 3 years. And people looked at me and saw that I was on the dean's list and I was always laughing and making jokes. And what they didn't know is that when I was sitting in the office with my door shut, I was calling the suicide prevention line.
Wow.
And I knew that if I didn't have some kind of help, my parents are going to be planning my funeral soon. And I actually did go to my mother and say, I need to find a psychiatrist because it's to that point.
Wow.
And I did. I started seeing a psychiatrist in college, getting a lot of therapy. And I would guarantee you that not one single person that I went to college with or was working with at that newspaper, none of them would have any idea that that was going on with me.
Yes.
I never told anyone until now. And it was something that I struggled with privately.
Right.
And I did manage to get it under control. But then I had my accident that caused all my brain surgeries. And I was in pain that I could not even describe to another person. There was one point in between my brain surgeries because I had 6 brain surgeries in 6 months.
Oh my God.
And I actually ended up dying for a little bit at one point. But before that happened, I was just in so much pain and they were telling me it was not going to get better. I was going to be disabled for the rest of my life. I'd never be able to work again. Just all of these horrible negative things. And I'm like, I cannot live like this. And I actually attempted suicide one night.
Oh my gosh.
And everybody who knew me at that time, all they could see was this strong survivor who was going through everything with humor. But behind the scenes, that's not what was happening. I was
Mm,
struggling so hard, but
mm,
I did not feel like I should put that on anybody else, that I didn't want to
right.
burden anybody with what I was going through. A lot of it was because I was going through so much that so many people were having to help me with. I didn't want to have them to help me more.
Right. Right, exactly. You felt like you didn't want to be a burden to them. That is one of the characteristics of someone who's contemplating suicide. They don't want to become a burden. That's one of the warning signs is feeling hopeless or feeling like you have no purpose or feeling trapped inside of your mind and talking about being a burden to others. All of those are factors.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I would guarantee you that nobody had any idea that one night I did actually attempt suicide because I was very careful about it. I wanted to make sure that my parents would get my life insurance money. So I knew it had to
Oh.
look like an accidental overdose from the medications that I was on.
And see, you had a plan in place. When you start thinking at that level, Diane,
Hmm.
wow, you were at that point.
Oh, yeah. And I made sure I did not give anything away that was important to me. I did not update my
Mm,
will at that time. I didn't get extra life insurance. I did not mention
mm,
to anybody that I was struggling because I wanted it to look like an accident and I knew I could not do anything to make them think otherwise. And I
wow.
was very meticulous about this.
You definitely had a plan in place, and I'm so glad that you did not go through with it.
Oh no, I went through with it and
No,
I
I mean,
slept for
I'm,
18 hours.
yeah, I'm glad you're still here to talk about it, Diane. That's, whew,
Well, and one of the things that I learned from that too is after sleeping so hard and so deep for 18 hours, I realized that a lot of my mental problems that I was having was coming from sleep deprivation too, because of all of the pain that I was in. And whenever I woke up from that, I'm like, okay, obviously there's a reason I woke up and I feel better. So we're just going to keep trying to get through all this.
wow, Diane, you're a remarkable woman. I'm so glad you're okay.
But that was one of those things where I really understood how people go through these things and how vital therapy is. And there's been a couple of times in my life since then that I'll, start feeling the stress and start feeling the anxiety and start feeling some of the just frustration with the things that I have to deal with because of my conditions. And I go to therapy. I'm like, okay, I need to talk to somebody about this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
ever let it get to that point anymore.
Right. Right.
And I have had some great therapists in my life who have taught me wonderful coping skills that I still use all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have spoken to people about how I've never told my personal story until now, but I have spoken to people about, I'll be here to support you if you need it. I understand what it's like to have these kinds of thoughts.
Yeah.
But I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the most important things right now is this trend that we're starting to see of people talking openly and honestly about their own struggles with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
makes people realize, oh my God, I'm not the only one.
You're not. You're not. And thank you for allowing me to be the person that you share this with publicly for the first time. I'm honored by that.
I think just from your story, the way that you shared yours, it is going to make it easier for other people to share their stories once they see how you had to go through this and the effect that it had on your life and how it has changed you forever being on the
Yes.
other side of it.
Yes.
So now, if there's one thing that you would want your father to be remembered for, what would it be?
Oh, I would want my father to be remembered for his love for his family. My father was an amazing guy. If you were to place him in a crowded room of 100 people, he would be the smartest person in the entire room. He had a big heart. He was sensitive. He loved his family. And I would want him to be remembered for the love that he exuded in his everyday life. He made everybody feel like they were someone special.
That's amazing. That's a definitely a good memorial for him.
Yeah.
Now, how would you like to be remembered?
When my mission on earth is over, and the pages of my life are reviewed, I want to be remembered for the love that I gave to the people around me. Spreading love is my oxygen. And I want to be remembered as someone who used her pain to go out into the world and make the world a better place by turning her pain into love. That's what I want to be remembered for.
That's fantastic. Before we go, tell people again, if they are having struggles with suicidal thoughts, where can they go for help?
If you're in the United States, you can dial 988, the Suicide Lifeline number, dial 988, just like you would in a crisis. You'll dial 911, dial 988, talk to someone, get the help. They have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trained professionals who can help you. And aside from that, I want you to find someone in your life that you can trust, that you can confide in, whether it be a neighbor, a sister, a friend. Find that one person that you can talk to. And on the flip side of that, Diane, I want to let people know how to respond to someone who may be having suicidal thoughts. If you have a person in your life and they call you and they say, I don't want to live anymore, I'm ready to end it all, ask the person directly. Don't be afraid to say it. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Speak to them in a low tone, not in a judging tone. Are you having thoughts of suicide? And if they say yes, listen to them. Don't try to fix what's broken, because 9 times out of 10, you won't be able to. But listen with love. Open up your heart and let them know that you're a soft place for them to land at this time in their lives, and get help with them. Don't judge them. Don't say to the person, "You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Oh my goodness, you can't be that weak. What's wrong with you?" It's not that serious. Don't talk to them in that way. Talk to them with empathy, compassion, and love. And just know that they've come to you because they see something in you that makes them feel safe. So go with that and help them.
And one thing that I would kind of add in there too is, if you're wanting to give them advice on how to fix their life, don't.
Thank
I
you.
mean, ask them, do you want me to give you suggestions, or do you just want me to listen? Because a lot of times the best thing you can do is just listen and say, I care.
Let them know that you're there for them.
Exactly.
I was on a radio program a while back, and there was a guy, he said something that was so profound, but it was so simple. He said, if you're on the phone with someone and they're contemplating suicide, go get them and take them somewhere. Put them in the car and take them for a ride. And I thought, wow. He says, you don't have to fix their problem, but just let them know that you're there for them. You are a beacon of support for that person. That's all they want. That's because when you're in a suicidal place, that's a very lonely journey. Most people go through with the act because of the sense of loneliness. So if they know that they've got that one person in their corner, that one person in their life that believes in them, that loves them in spite of their thoughts, that could be just the love that they need to stay here on earth a little bit longer.
And I would say also, check in on those friends that you think are the strong ones that can deal with everything on their own. Just check in with them once in a while and say, how are you doing? Everything good?
Yeah.
Do you need to talk?
Right. You don't know what kind of impact you can have on a person just from being in your normal everyday mode. I was at work the other day, and I work in a building. There's over 34 floors in the building. And I get on the elevator, and there's an Amazon driver on the elevator with me, a young lady. And I said, "Hello, how are you today? How is it at Amazon?" And she said, "Oh, it's okay." She said, "You know what? Thank you for asking." She says, "I go through so much throughout the course of the day. No one really asks or cares about how my day is going. So thank you for that." And I go, "Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day." So sometimes throughout the course of the day, you have those opportunities to help someone, and you may not even realize the impact that special hello or that nice smile could have on someone.
I've actually had friends ask me, it's like, why do you go around telling people, oh, I like your shoes. Oh, I like your hair. Oh, I like your purse or whatever. It's like, because that may be the only nice thing that they hear all day long. You don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah, and it's an instrument of love. You're exuding love. When you do that to a person, that's an act of love. We all need love.
Mm-hmm.
Love is the thing that makes all things beautiful. Love is the heartbeat of life. So when you're out, Diane, and you're complimenting people, that's an act of love.
See, and I think that is a perfect way to end this. People need to go out and have a few acts of love today.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being part of this episode today. Now, tell everybody real quick, where can they find you?
I have a website, www.beautifultoy.net. That's beautiful, TOY.net. I am on Facebook. My page is Speaking of Love Podcast. You can also find me on Facebook. I am Toya Bond. That's LA space capital T OYA, Toya Bond. I have 3 books that you can purchase on Amazon. Speaking of Love, a suicide loss survivor's guide of hope, healing, and love. Then I have my cookbook called Please Pass the Love. And then I'm also a part of an anthology with 20 other authors from all around the world. And that book is called Relentless. So you can find all 3 of those books on Amazon. You can reach out to me on Facebook or through my website, beautifultoy.net. And Diane, I want to take this time to thank you for having me as a guest. You are a remarkable woman. I value and I appreciate you, and just thank you for all that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And for our listeners, I will be sure to put all of the links to her website and social media in the description of today's podcast. And you are going to be featured as our cookbook author for the first issue this year of Book Banter magazine, where we will be sharing one of your delicious recipes.
Oh, thank you. That is so awesome.
So there you have it, folks. My interview with the incredible Toya Bond. And if you missed it, we did another interview where I was a guest on her podcast, Speaking of Love. You can check that out on my website, burkhartbooks.com, or on Toya's website, which you can find in the description of this podcast. Coming in October, I do have my medical memoir, Free Bad Haircut with Each Craniotomy, where I will be detailing more of the struggles that I went through as I was going through all the brain surgeries in 2004. I share very honestly about this event in my life where I had a failed attempt to take my own life, and also about having a MRSA staph infection, which killed me at one point, and what that did to my whole outlook on life. So be sure to keep watching for that as I give updates as I'm getting closer to publication in October of 2024, which will be the 20th anniversary of all of my brain surgeries. Now, don't forget to go into the description of today's podcast and check out all of Toya's social media links so that you can find out more about her and the great work that she is doing with her books, her podcast, and her advocacy. And also, don't forget her incredible cookbook. So I think that's enough for today, folks. Be sure to go out and spread some love today and be happy.